welcome everybody. It's fantastic to see so many people here, and I think it just demonstrates this as a hot topic. We've had a really good reaction to this when we put it out, and so we're looking forward to getting stuck in. So the main aim of today is really just to introduce the kind of concept of belonging and what that kind of means, what it is, but also thinking about how important that is for individuals, their well-being, but also their career management and how that impacts it. The other thing that myself and Neil are really keen to do is give you some really good, useful tips and advice and guidance that you can take away from today, whilst also signposting you to things that you can do after the session today. So hopefully you'll find a lot of that useful and have some real things to take away. And the other thing we're going to really cover is around some of the benefits of really focusing on this and why we're all here today and what we want to talk about. Okay, so before we kick things off, I think it's important for us to introduce who we are and what we do. So I'll start first. So I'm Carly Bowers, and I'm a career coach and trainer with personal career management. My background's in HR, where I actually specialised in talent and career development. And I've got lots of experience in terms of in-house career management initiatives. So I can share a bit of insight information on where that's worked well, and what the benefits of some of that are. So yeah, currently kind of working with lots of different clients, individuals, but also corporates, thinking about kind of how they can meet their career management objectives, etc. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on today's conversation. And actually, it was during my time in HR, when I was back in my generalist days as a business partner, where I met Neil. So Neil is the founder of the Stress Management Society. But I'm going to pass over to Neil now to introduce himself.
Thank you, Carly, and it's such a pleasure to be here with you again today. And yeah, it was funny when we were speaking a couple of months ago. I think when we kind of tracked back, we've known each other for quite a long time, coming on to like 15, 16 years. So I've been in this position for almost 2 decades now. I run a charitable nonprofit organisation called the Stress Management Society. And I'm the Chief Insights Officer for a research and consultancy organisation called International Wellbeing Insights. So I've spent the last 2 decades essentially being blessed to have found my ikigai, my reason for being, which is to hopefully help to contribute to creating a happier, healthier, more resilient world by ensuring that the well-being, mental health, happiness sits at the very centre of what we do, how we run our societies, our companies, our organisations, and our communities. And it's great to have had the opportunity to volunteer on planet Earth at this time. Who knows where my next destination will be, but right now there seems to be a lot of work to do. So it's great that we're able to be here today, Carly, and have this conversation, and so many people have showed up for it.
Oh, thanks, Neil. Okay, so as I said, we want to try and be as interactive as we can, but with so many people on, we might struggle a little bit, but we'll stick with that thing. So just before we jump in and start sharing some of our own insights, and the way we're going to play it today is really have a discussion, myself and Neil, around some of this. So what we'd like to do is just get a sense of, excuse the pun, but a sense of what your understanding of belonging is. So what does belonging mean to you? So it could be a one-word answer, it could be a sentence, but just if you can just put in the chat what belonging means to you. And I'll just give you a few moments. Neil, sorry, you want to add?
I'm going to add to that as well. In addition to what does belonging mean to you, something motivated you and inspired you to turn up today. I'm hoping you weren't press ganged into this session by one of our team, but you are here. You've invested your most valuable resource to attend this session, which is your time. And right now, we are under so much pressure and there is so much demand. Every day, it seems to be that we're playing a video game for 8 to 10 hours a day, many of us still working from home, that we get paid for. And the pressure on us is greater than it has ever been. But you managed to find an hour of your valuable time, the one resource you cannot replace when it's gone, to be here. What was it that led you to sign up and show up for this session? And what is it that you hope to achieve from this session? Because obviously, Carly and myself, we could talk, we were talking just before we went live, we could talk for hours, but we want to be sure that you get maximum value and we can serve you to the best of our ability. So give us a sense of what it is that you hope to achieve by the time we get to 1 o'clock GMT this afternoon. BST, sorry, we're not in GMT at the moment.
Absolutely, thanks, Neil. Yeah, I think that's really important to get a bit of a sense of that. So we'll give you a couple of moments to do that. And main person I forgot to introduce, and apologies for that, is my colleague Ellen. So Ellen is here to help us. very much on the kind of technical side, and she's going to relay some of your comments that you're putting in now to the chat to us, and we can respond. But also, if you have any technical issues or any questions, please contact Ellen directly on the chat. That'd be absolutely fine. She can get back to you. And similarly, she's going to make sure that we keep to time today, because as Neil said, I think this is something we could talk all day about. We've had some great discussions recently where we both get quite infused from our different perspectives, and we can see how important these sorts of topics are and how relevant and linked they are, I think is the other thing, isn't it, Neil?
Holly, to kick things off, obviously, while we're waiting for some of the chats to come in, what does belonging mean to you? Ultimately, this is something I know you spend a lot of time talking about. We've spoken about it. I know it's a very big part of your work. What does belonging mean to you, particularly from a performance management, career management perspective?
Great question, Neil. And I wasn't prepared for that. So thanks for putting me on the spot. No, I'm joking. So no, for me, I mean, absolutely, this is something that I give consideration to. And obviously, when I'm working with different clients, it's something that I help them focus on and really try to get clarity on. I think for me, belonging is all about fulfillment. It's something that belonging is when you feel like you fit. And I've been in organisations as an employee where I haven't felt like I fitted. I've been in roles where I haven't felt like I fitted, but I've also been in those roles and organisations where I have. So I think for me, it's something where it all just sort of gels and it feels like it makes sense. And that's kind of where I am with it. How about yourself, Neil? I want to deflect that back to you. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been exploring kind of this sense of social cohesion, social isolation. And what fascinated me is, we have arrived at a point just to kind of talk about, where we're at and the impact this is having on society and the true costs, both cultural, commercial, moral costs to society. That we've arrived at a point here in 2022 where suicide is the main cause of death for a man under the age of 45 in weird countries. When I say weird, I'm not being derogatory to any countries. It's an acronym that stands for Western, Educated, Industrialized, Rich, Democratic countries, which obviously our country, most of Europe, North America, etc., would be described as weird cultures or weird countries. But suicide is the main cause of death for a man under the age of 45 in a weird country, rapidly becoming so for a 15 to 29-year-old. And when we started looking at the research that exists over the last 50 or 60 years, there's a direct correlation between the increase of serious mental health issues, mental illness, and suicidality, and the degradation of society and community. Because as we have started to live a more industrialized, individualized experience, particularly over the last 20 years, that's had an impact on people because the connections we feel are more superficial than ever before, particularly with the advent of social media, where people aren't engaged and connect with each other in a more meaningful way. And this is, for me, a real concern because we live in a country of 60 odd million people. I live in London, there's 8 million of us. But what I found fascinating is the amount of people in London that were reporting feeling chronic loneliness. You are never alone. There's always people around. I live in Northwest London. I think, even without counting, in probably a square mile of me, there's probably several thousand people, if not tens of thousands of people. Yet it can be one of the loneliest places. Why? Because we're missing that deeper, more meaningful connection with our fellow men and women. So this is really where, for me, the sense of belonging is that we feel a part of something, that we feel a sense of connection. And what's happened, particularly over the last 2 years, literally an axe came in and chopped what was left of that sense of connection, because there are many people that are working in jobs right now, which they may have started over the last 2 years, never stepped foot in an office, never met a colleague. It's not real. And, how often have you stayed in a role or a job or with a company longer than you should have because you cared about the people? They were your friends. You felt a sense of connection. You felt a part of something. And as human beings, we need that sense of belonging. It's very much part of our philosophical DNA that we need to feel connected to something. That's why religion up until a few hundred years ago was very, very popular, because people wanted to feel that sense of connection, which is why even in modern society, football is still something that, a lot of people, particularly men, really gravitate towards, because it gives them that sense of connection, that
and ladies.
No, absolutely. And I think this for me is what we're really starting to lack in modern society, people feeling that kind of sense of disconnection, isolation, loneliness, lack of community, lack of belonging. And if we really want to tackle mental health and the more serious issues that go along with that, we could do all the self-care stuff, which is what people have been promoting for many years. Do some meditation, make sure you get your steps in, you know, switch off your technology, get a good night's sleep. That stuff is great, but that's just dealing with the symptoms. For me, the root cause is that sense of isolation that people are experiencing, which is why for Stress Awareness Month this year, the theme was community. Because until we start bringing people together away from this sense of polarity and profanity, you believe something different to me, so you are the enemy and you must die. I'm not quite sure how that happened, because in the past we could just agree to disagree. You're wearing red, I'm wearing blue. That's okay. You're expressing yourself differently to me. But in the world we find ourselves in, that red must mean something, which means you're a particular type of person, which means we must cancel you and you are the enemy. And it's like,
absolutely, yeah.
That's where a lot of people feel like they can't belong, because unless they subscribe to the common narrative, kind of they're going against the grain, and that obviously comes with the repercussions, and people can't be themselves anymore. Belonging means that you can be yourself and you're accepted for who you are, because a community only flourishes when we have that diversity of thoughts, feelings, actions, belief systems, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't agree more with all of that, really, Neil. And I think it's going to be interesting now when we go into the chat to see some of everyone's comments. But I think on that, just sticking with that theme around kind of where we are now, like you say, it's not real. We're in this weird world now, and particularly when we talk about the world of work and where we are now with that. You know, we're in a world where people want autonomy over where, how, when they work, right? And actually, I saw a recent report in the Harvard Business Review, just that was sort of saying, okay, well, if people feel like they've got autonomy over those things, they experience a better work experience, right? And with that comes a sense of belonging. So it is so important, I think, that organisations are responding to that, because otherwise they're going to be behind the curve. So from the kind of career perspective, certainly that's that. We're also in a really difficult jobs market at the moment, as I'm sure a lot of people are aware. You know, we're in a situation where employees are in the driving seat here. And it's the first time in my career, truly, I mean, we had the recession, etc., but truly that people are in the driving seat. The ONS came out with stats around the fact that there's job opportunities out there. You know, there's fewer unemployed people than there is job vacancies. So there's opportunities for people out there, and they're voting with their feet. If they're not comfortable, they're not feeling that sense of belonging at an organisation, they're gonna leave. So people are struggling to, you know, attract and retain people. So we've got to be aware of that. And I think for me, you know, what you just echoing a bit of what you said, Neil, but very much on the kind of career side, you know, organisations need to be agile, they need to be resilient, they need to respond to this to make sure that they're relevant in terms of today's society.
And Carly, I want to sort of expand on that, because for me this is fascinating. You know, I think most of us have now come across the term the Great Resignation. If any of you haven't, it's what what they're using to describe the current circumstances. This has never really happened before during a significant economic downturn. Normally, when there's a significant economic downturn, people hold on to their jobs for dear life because they're not sure what's going to happen next. In 2008, etc., and in previous kind of economic downturns, because of the fear and the uncertainty, people were waiting to see how this played out. This is the first time where we've got some serious economic challenges, hyperinflation, interest rates going up, cost of living going up exponentially. Yeah, people are, as you said, voting with their feet. They are leaving their jobs. Why is this situation different? Why are people not just hunkering down and trying to get through this kind of this downturn by holding on to what they currently have? And our research is suggesting people don't feel that sense of connection. They don't feel a part of something in the way they would have done in the past, where they were literally going to rally to find a way through this tough time. It's like, well, I don't owe you anything. You know, you're just an organization that pays my bills every month that I see through my video camera, but I don't have real human connections. Those water cooler moments, those coffee machine moments where you're actually building human relationships have been lost during this period. And even though people are starting to return to work, it's not in the same way it was before. We're not all in at the same time. We're not spending as much time with each other. And these are people you have functional, technical, operational relationships with rather than human relationships. The most important question you can ask your people is, do you feel valued? It's one of the most important questions we ask when we do an audit for a client. When we help them to understand where they are right now, we'll do a wellbeing audit, employee engagement survey, people culture wellbeing survey. And that's the overriding thing we want to understand. Do you feel valued? Because if you don't, someone offers you a better opportunity or a little bit more money or a little bit less stress, and you're out of there because you feel no sense of belonging to this organization. And I think this is where we need to think more than just, are we giving them the tools and resources to do their job? Are we paying them well? Particularly now, we've arrived at a point where money isn't everything for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. People are willing to go to different jobs in different companies that might pay a bit less, but they feel more engaged.
Absolutely. And again, completely, and this is why this is such a dual topic from both perspectives. And that's something that we are seeing with clients. They are, individual clients are very clear in kind of what they're looking for, and it isn't always driven by money. And that's been age old. I mean, that's, when I did my HR studies, that was something. It isn't the main thing, and it's not always the main factor for people. There's so much more now, and people have been exposed to a different way of working. And the failing that I think I'm seeing from a lot of organisations is that, right, well, that was great. You reacted to an emergency situation. You stayed at home. You did your job, great. But now we want you all back in as much as possible. Now, there is need for people to get back into the office for exactly that reason, that kind of human relationship side of it. But it's, okay, well, how can we do a blend of this? And what is important to our people? Let's talk to them. So we're an advocate for kind of career conversations, which I'll mention a bit later. And that's something that can really help. And it's just like you said, Neil, it's that open conversation, open questions of, do you feel valued? Are you happy right now? It's that sort of thing, isn't it?
And you don't do wellbeing to your people or for your people. It's a collective journey. Everybody needs to feel a part of this journey. They need to feel a part of something. It was Simon Sinek that wrote the book Start With Why, which essentially, my interpretation of it, it's kind of how companies have built a spiritual belief system around why they exist, more than just what you do for a living. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing, and this is a question I ask for all of you, but I'm going to ask Carly because she's going to be able to respond. You work for an organization. What does your organization do?
What do we do? Well, we're career coaches. We're collective career coaches. We are supportive of people's careers, but more than anything, from my own perspective, they support. They train. It's that kind of, like you were saying, really that kind of, I feel supported where I'm at.
But I say to you, performance career management doesn't do any of those things because it can't. Why? Because it doesn't actually exist. It's a figment of our collective imagination. Who does the career coaching? Who does all kind of the support work? Who's one that makes the difference in your clients' lives? Is it the company?
It's the people. It's the people. They have to take ownership of their own careers, right?
Absolutely. And it's your coaches that
which I'll talk about.
which do the work. Now, here's the thing, if you work for Google, you might think, oh, we create the technology that creates the future. If you work for Philips, we make toothbrushes or healthcare innovation or whatever. You don't do any of those things. The people that work there do those things. And when we start to reset the focus to understand that we cannot achieve anything without our people, unless you're a fully automated organization, which is AI driven and everything is run by technology. But even then, the virtual humans, the AI, the machine technology is doing the work, if that makes sense.
Indeed.
And
yeah.
How often I talk to organizations, what do you do? And they'll reel off all the services they deliver. So, well, that's your company doesn't do that. The people that work there do. Start to ensure that we are maximizing I hate the term human capital, but our people, our resources are the most valuable asset in our organization.
That's right.
When they're put at the center of what we do, we will flourish. But also, they will want to be a part of that. You are more likely to retain and attract the best staff because people feel that they're part of something rather than I'm just a commodity that is here to churn out output.
Absolutely.
I think this is something that's not just true at an organizational and a company level. This is also true at a national level and a country level. It was in 2018 that the research that Mind, ourselves, and a few other organizations were involved with had suggested that chronic loneliness was rapidly becoming one of the biggest issues that was affecting society from a mental health perspective. There was an estimate by 2023 that a third of the population would experience chronic loneliness. That happened several years earlier because obviously the pandemic. That research was taken so seriously by the government in 2018, they put a loneliness minister in place. So we actually, Great Britain, United Kingdom, should I say, has a government minister responsible for loneliness. Sadly, we've now learned it was pretty much a token gesture, but the thought was there because the recognition was there. This is a serious issue. Now, when we talk about things like loneliness, belonging, connection, culture, there are a lot of people that kind of roll their eyes in the back of the head. You know, they maybe have a little bit more of an old school way of looking at things and think, oh, that's just a pink and fluffy HR thing. I'm sitting here saying to you, it is one of the biggest risk areas in any organization, not just from a cultural and commercial perspective. I'm talking about from a moral and ethical perspective, because we have to appreciate that over the last couple of years, we have spent a lot of time talking about things that risk lives, right? COVID is a great example. I'm not here to diminish the impact COVID had, but you know, if we're talking about for young, otherwise healthy people with no underlying health conditions, in October 2020 in Japan, more people took their lives than died from the whole year from COVID. To give you perspective, on average, over the last couple of years, about 50,000 people die from all the wars on the planet put together, right? It's a lot of people, but it's 50,000 people. You know, up until a couple of months ago, COVID was the thing that took the headlines. Now it's obviously the war in Ukraine. And I'm not sitting here saying these things aren't tragedies, they are. But let's give context. 1.2 million people on average take their life every single year. 14.3% of all the people that die do so as a result of their own hand. I'm giving you these numbers as context because you're not going to read that in the papers or see that on television. Now, I'm saying, both from a societal, from a moral perspective, but also from an organizational perspective, I spent a lot of time working with organizations that have sadly lost someone due to mental health because they may have taken their own life. The impact of that, not just to the individual, but the people around them, and I know we've worked together on in organizations where they've had this impact, the repercussions can be deep and profound and can last for many, many years, notwithstanding the moral impact. We've lost someone. Now, we need to get better at that. When people feel that they belong and they're a part of something, they're part of a community, they're more likely to put their hand up, seek out the help, and to lean on each other. When you feel like you're isolated, alone, and no one cares, you're going to find that we'll, number one, fail the most vulnerable members of our society, and we won't pick up there's an issue until it's already too late. This, for me, is why this is ultra important. Because particularly with younger people who have lost so much over the last couple of years, where the future looks pretty bleak. Imagine you're just, 18, 19 years of age. You've not got a huge amount to look forward to. Like literally the world has been turned on its head and it's like turned to crap, basically. So we really do need to get better at having these kind of conversations. Ensuring what your belief systems are, what God you pray to, what food you eat, your sexuality, your gender orientation, like your race, religion, these things don't matter. Everyone should feel that they can belong as part of our diverse multicultural society and our community. And I think this is, for me, why this conversation is so important. We still do have a lot of work to do on this.
Absolutely. Yeah, can't agree more with all of that, Neil. Thank you. And I'm just conscious of time and kind of just moving us forward. So let's revisit what our lovely participants here today have sort of said of what their sense of belonging is, or what they believe, what belonging is to them, but also kind of why they're here today. So Ellen, could you just give us a snapshot of a few of the comments in the chat? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. So we've got a couple of different answers. Somebody said, having your contribution acknowledged. I can be my true self without fear, feeling comfortable in an environment, again, being able to be your authentic self, feeling safe, feeling part of a team, having purpose and place. Yeah, kind of similar along those themes, really.
Brilliant. Yeah. What do you think of those, Neil? What's your reaction to some of that?
I absolutely agree. I wrote a poem a while ago, and there was a line in it which is, the only way forward to save humanity is by finding unity through the power of our community. Because right now we live in a world filled with polarity, fueled by profanity, and the disconnection we're experiencing is greater than ever before. And I think this, for me, is how do we bring people together? we're facing common challenges. As we stand shoulder to shoulder, there's nothing that we can't overcome, but we're so busy fighting each other. As Machiavelli taught us in The Art of War, the way to defeat the enemy is ensure that people are fighting each other. They're not fighting the real threats that are affecting our societies. And I think this is the moment for us to really find ways to be able to come together, even if we don't agree, even if we don't see the world in the same way, using tools like love, compassion, empathy, which sounds pretty hippie, but actually for me, I appreciate when I come across someone that sees the world differently to me. And I want to be able to see how you see things, because as we understand each other, we can find a way forward. Now, particularly in the modern workplace, we've got such diversity, but the biggest challenge for me from a diversity perspective is the age gap. You've got people from different generations that see the world in a very different way. You may be recruiting, young graduates, and they've grown up in a very different world. Their engagement and the things that they're exposed to are very different to how yours may be if you're a little bit older. How can we get to the point where we can see how they see things? Because otherwise, how can we possibly understand their challenges, how they view the world, their experience of the world, and how can we make sure they're a part of what we do, they feel engaged, and they want to be here, and they want to stay here. So I think that all of the comments that come up today really talks to that for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to relay them back, so recognition is what I took from it. No fear, feeling comfortable, feeling safe, part of the team, having purpose, play. They're very emotive type words. And thank you for sharing those, everybody. I think that's really great, because it does give us a context in a way. So it's the secondary question from Neil was kind of why you're here. And I think there's something around addressing some of those and how we can help to address some of those within the workplace. And was there anything specific in the chat around people's objectives of being here, or was it very much around those kind of things of what belonging means to people?
Yeah, just sort of along those.
Great.
Those lines,
I think that gives us enough. That's absolutely fine. Okay, brilliant. Okay, then in terms of, sorry, Neil.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, Carly, I think we've got a sense of what people are hoping to achieve and what belonging means to them. Why is this something we need to take seriously? Is that surely this? This is one of those pink and fluffy things that's left to the HR advisor that's just started to do something a bit like team building or something like that, some team bonding activities. Why is this something we need not just to be giving a bit of a token gesture to, but this is something that every senior leader, everyone at board level needs to be considering as part of their business strategy or organizational strategy?
Well, exactly. I think this is so important for all organizations. And like you said a bit earlier, like you were giving numbers there because you're trying to give that stark reality of actually what this means to people. But I think from the business perspective, most companies are here to make money, and unless you're not non-for-profit, whatever, charity, whatever, most people are here to make money. Okay. So a lot of people on this call, with your senior leaders, HR, whatever, you understand that you're in a role that you want to help the business do as well as possible, be recognized for being perhaps leaders in industry, forward thinkers, whatever it might be. But also ultimately there's a bottom line. Okay. So I think from that perspective, and I'm just going to share something with you because I just want to talk to this slide. I was keen not to use too many slides, but I think it's relevant in this scenario. So let me just get that on for you nicely. Okay. So when I think about belonging at work, and obviously that's the kind of the angle that I'm coming from, particularly from my HR perspective, but also as a career coach. For me, stepping back, it's really thinking about, okay, well, everything needs to work in harmony, okay? In an organisation, everything needs to work in harmony. Now, we know that isn't always the case. There's often senior leadership changes, there's strategy changes, there might be lots of people that have left the organisation or lots of people that have joined the organisation, hopefully. But ultimately, there's constant change. And we've spoken about the impact of COVID and the new way of working, this new world that we find ourselves in. But for me, it's very simple. If things are working in harmony, it's gonna click, okay? So when I think about this, if you look at this slide, I've got two things in orange. I've got talent management strategy. So what is the strategy? How does that align to the organisation strategy and what the organisation is trying to achieve? And ultimately, if you get all these other steps right, all these other little shapes right, you're going to get some benefits. And the benefits of that are going to be better engagement, better retention, and ultimately you're going to have a diverse and inclusive kind of talent pipeline. So when we talk about our people, when I talk about people in an organisation, I'm talking about the talent. everyone's talent, right? If you're hiring good people, you're hiring talent. So you want to keep those people, or at least you want to develop those people, okay? And that's what all organisations should be looking to achieve. So when we're thinking about belonging and the sense of belonging being at the heart of this, that starts at the very outset. That starts with your recruitment strategy. That starts with, okay, well, what are the skills that we need in this organisation? You know, who do we need and why do we need it? What experience do we need? Okay, and what kind of people do we need? So when I talk about values and interests, that's what I do a lot of work with as a career coach, with people around, okay, well, what do you value? What are your, you know, what's important to you? What drives you? You know, is it money? As we've said, not always the first thing that comes out of people's mouths. There can be a list of other things. You know, it could be, you know, a sense of purpose. You know, it could be the fact that you want a better work-life balance, which is obviously, you know, for a lot of people at the moment, that's a key thing. What interests you is the work that your organisation is doing. Does that interest you? So when you're looking for new opportunities, or when you're trying to hire people into your organisation, find out a bit more about them as people. You know, as you know, Neil's been talking about this, the people. So I think rather than seeing it as filling holes, filling gaps, get the right people in. I know we're in a difficult market, as we said at the start, but I think it's very important there. And kind of that whole journey in piece, that induction piece, how are you supporting people coming into your organisation? Okay, so Neil's mentioned kind of the younger generation. Now, for me, yeah, people come grads. So a lot of companies have grad schemes, but over the last couple of years, a lot of that type of work and kind of social element of a grad scheme has gone. You know, people are just logging on, and you know, everything's very virtual. They're seeing a few people in the office, perhaps. It's a completely different world for them now. So what are you doing to really support people? Because that first sort of 3 to 6 months of any new job at any time is crucial in how you're going to retain, or if you're going to retain people. Think about how you can network. How can you as an organisation help people talk to people? You know, it could be virtually, it could be meetings, it could be other social events, whatever, you know, is allowed and can happen now should be done, because it's thinking about how you're connecting your people, as Neil said, to stop that kind of feeling of loneliness, and help people connect and get that sense of belonging, because that's going to be so important. And this all comes under kind of organisational strategy. What are you doing about this? Are you doing anything about it? Development, again, you know, it's thinking about a lot of people who don't feel a sense of belonging will be in jobs where they're thinking, oh, don't like what I'm doing, you know, I don't see where I'm going next. How do I get to over here? I've got no idea what my path is, where I'm going. And that's where people sometimes lose their sense of belonging, particularly in organisations, and they just leave. So I would urge you all to think about, okay, well, what kind of conversations am I having with these people? You know, am I having a career conversation? Now, career conversation is not a performance management conversation. It's not something where you wrap it up at the end of the year, you're doing their appraisal, you're doing your, you know, have they done well this year? Great. You know, it's not wrapped up in there. It's something different to that. It's talking about what is motivating them. Again, who are they? You know, what is it they're looking for? What are they interested in doing? Because it may be they're doing one element of a role in an organisation, but actually they've got interest and capability to do something else, or they want to develop into something else. So it's really thinking about how you can offer people breadth of experience. It may not be, you know, careers are completely different now. They're not linear. You know, they're not just up a ladder. It's literally thinking about how broad can you give people experience within your organisation, and it's only through conversation sometimes that's going to come out. You know, it's not just going to happen, and that's where that ownership comes on the individual. And having these conversations with people will start to make that clear to people that they need to take ownership of some of this stuff. So I'm not saying for 1 minute as an organisation or as a leader and manager, do you have to have all the answers. That's, I think, sometimes the fear of having these types of conversations. It's not that, it's having an open conversation about some of this stuff. And just moving on swiftly, because I know Neil's got some things to say as well in relation to all of this. Retention, again, career conversations, they can help with that. They can open up internal opportunities. So it's not a case of, I'm not happy, I'm thinking of leaving. Okay, great, bye then. It's okay, well, you've done this today, or this is what you're really good at. Have you thought about doing this? And again, it's connecting your people and thinking about what's good for them and their development. And that, as I say, that will just bring dividends in terms of benefits to your organisation. But I think the other thing I would just urge is, you know, when we talk about strategies, and I've been there, I've been in organisations where strategies keep changing and new things come in and people don't know where they are. So I think the other thing is a bit of kind of clarity, transparency, particularly over processes and things like that, helps. It really does help with people having that sense of belonging and connection to the organisation. Because if things are happening and there's no reason for it, or people don't understand what's happening in their organisation, they're not going to feel connected to it. They're not going to feel that loyalty. And for me, it's as simple as that. If all these things are working in harmony, it can work really well. And I would just, you know, as I say, career conversations are a great thing for this type of thing. And this is something that we can help with as career coaches in terms of understanding what that actually means and how they can be as effective as possible. So I'm just going to stop sharing that one there. And just ask Neil, have you got any kind of response to some of what I've just spoken about?
Yeah, and actually, my team had actually created a couple of slides which talk directly to what you were saying, is around having those conversations, meaningful conversations. You know, the first stat on the screen there is 39% of people in Britain report not having had a meaningful conversation with someone in the last 2 weeks. That's really concerning. Now, also, we're spending, you know, 8, 9, 10 hours a day working. A lot of those meaningful conversations would usually come about in the working environment. Now, how many of you through your careers, particularly when you were starting your career, built friendships, relationships that even when you left that company, these people ended up becoming friends for life? We're starting to see that's happening less and less. And it's interesting you talked about strategy as well, because, you know, talking to strategy, when it comes to sales, marketing, resources, facilities, often these things are tied to the business plan. When it comes to people, culture, and well-being, there's very few organizations we're working with currently that have actually tied this to their business plan. So strategies, essentially, if we're talking about sort of a jigsaw puzzle, initiatives, we're doing some training, we've done some wellbeing workshops, we've done some, you know, team bonding exercises, we've got some policies, process, we've got an EAP, we've got a CALF, we've done some, you know, performance management stuff. Those are pieces of the jigsaw. Great. But how do you know you're assembling these pieces correctly and you're building the picture you want if you don't have the picture on the front of the box? That is the strategy. Now, as I said, like, you know, most senior leaders understand the importance of strategy when it comes to most fundamental areas of a business. But why are we not looking at the most important asset in any organization in the same way we would our technology? You'd have, like, you know, with your computers, for example, you'd have a plan around sort of, you know, what you're going to purchase, how you're going to manage and maintain your IT infrastructure. Are you doing the same with your people? Do you have a plan in place for that? So this is really where having some of those kind of meaningful conversations, and literally what we're finding is sometimes people go in to have those meaningful conversations cold. So it's just like, all right, let's sit down. Tell me how you're doing. What's going on? What you know, what do you want to achieve the year ahead? Which is kind of like going in for a kiss without whining and dining roses and chocolate. I mean, you kind of need to have an opportunity to warm people up, which means, are you having those regular opportunities during team meetings and ongoing dialogues where you are engaging people meaningfully? Because otherwise, when you do go in and ask that question, or your annual employee survey or whatever, you aren't going to get a meaningful response.
Yeah.
Because there's been no foreplay. And sadly, that's where, for me, it goes wrong for a lot of people. They're going in for the kill without actually taking the time to warm it up. And also, when people do have a serious challenge, there are a lot of people out there that are struggling in silence. You know, there's astonishing statistics. 67% of people in the UK have felt serious social isolation and loneliness following a bereavement. So when someone is going through a tough time, they've lost someone, they've got a mental health issue, we tend to give them a white berth because we don't know what to say. I lost my best friend 2.5 months ago. You know, people will start with, I'm sorry, be strong, you'll get through this. And they will literally give you a white berth after that because they don't know what to say to you. And so it can very easily happen. And we are all going through this collective period of grief right now, not just grieving people, but a loss of the way of life that we used to enjoy previous to everything that's happened over the last couple of years. But just as a couple of other things that I want to talk against, which are very related to the things you shared, is, you know, we've been talking about the Great Resignation. Now, we've been looking into this. Almost half of the executives that we have surveyed reported that their company experienced a drastically higher turnover rate in the last 6 months. So this is not just a notion. This is now, you know, something that's being documented. 84% stated that openings were going unfulfilled for longer than normal. you know, I think this for me is a real concern. We've got burnout as one of the top hot topics of conversation. More of our clients now are concerned about burnout and the risk of burnout than ever before. Now, you know, again, you get to the point where your job causes you enough stress. Eventually, you're going to get to the point where you think, well, you know, solve this for a game of soldiers. I'm going to go off and do something that's less taxing. So, you know, the Microsoft's work trend index, 41% of people are likely to consider leaving their jobs in the next year. That's high, very high.
Very high, yeah.
1 in 5 think their employer doesn't care about their work-life balance. Again, I'd ask for a show of hands. How many of you have felt that before? 54% of the global workforce feel overworked and 39% feel exhausted. Now, this is, again, talking to the issues around burnout. This is where, when we feel a sense of belonging, we feel like we're a part of something, we are working together towards a common goal, the chances are that we can work together to find the solutions to the challenges that we're facing. Now, I guess, you know, your framework was really, really powerful. And I think for me, whose responsibility is this? Is this, you know, the employee benefits officer? Is it some organization will have an OC health team or HRBPs or even, you know, well-being sort of advisors that work, you know, within the HR function? It could be health and safety. I'm here to say to you, well, firstly, it's everybody's job to execute this culture shift, but the ownership must come from the top table. Just like with anything else, any other business strategic proposition is owned at exco level, this must be as well. So part of what we've been working towards to ensure people have a good understanding of how to put this forward, we've created a program. It's called the Mental Wellbeing Champions and Ambassadors Program, which is not mental health first aid. Mental health first aid is kind of like, you know, someone falls down the stairs, you kind of know what to do to triage them, to refer them to more structured medical help if they need it, or to patch them up. The Champions and Ambassadors Program is, how do we prevent these issues from happening in the first place? How do we have people throughout the organization from different backgrounds, really diverse group of people that are championing and ambassadoring how we create a culture of well-being, a culture where we all feel that we belong? This at the moment is our flagship program. Philips have engaged us to train 5,000 people across their workforce of 80,000 people to be mental health champions. And for the first time, we're running this as a public program as well. And this is not kind of a sales pitch, but it's more just kind of raising awareness of the fact that you need to have people, regardless of how big your organization is, you need to have people dotted out throughout your organization that will be the flag bearers, that will be raising awareness of why this is important. So you're not just leaving it to be 1 or 2 people with responsibility. As Malcolm Gladwell taught us in the book, The Tipping Point, for us to create culture change across any society, you don't need everyone on board, but you need a critical mass. And that's, you know, if you've got 50, 60% of people that buy into an idea, it becomes the accepted norm. We've seen this over the last couple of years, where something that was not even a thing for us, enough people bought into it and it became the way it is now. And this is what I'm saying to you, is how can we make this the way it is within our organizations, within our communities, within our societies? Because we need to take drastic action. This is a critical point. We're losing far too many people. We're putting too many young people into the ground unnecessarily. We are losing too many good people in our organizations because they're going off to do something else, or they're literally turning their back on their, not just their job, but their career. The amount of people I've come across that have turned their back on their corporate jobs to be life coaches or yoga teachers or meditation teachers or whatever, or just to go off and live in South America and volunteer in a wildlife sanctuary. And that's, you know, I literally know 3 people that have done exactly that, turn their back on city jobs. If we get this right, we can ensure that people are able to express themselves and be themselves. And that really adds to kind of our collective success rather than taking away from that. We don't want identikit kind of automatons. We really want to be able to celebrate kind of the diversity and for everyone to feel that they can belong. What are we going to do to ensure that that happens? I'm just going to stop sharing screens. And that is why this is one of the most important conversations of our time. Because we literally are failing some of the most vulnerable members of our society by not having these conversations.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, completely right now. Thank you for that. I think that's, and I love, you're always great at your kind of your stats and everything, because I think that just shows the context of which we're in. And I think for me, it's about that proactivity. So I agree. I mean, a lot of these things, you know, that top-down approach, etc. It does. You know, it's all our collective responsibility. But I think you and I, you know, our companies, what we do, what our drive really is to get into these organisations and get them to hear this message. You know, to really understand. You know, okay, well, why is this important? So exactly what we're talking about here today. Why is it important? What can you be doing about it? And ultimately, if you guys on this call today, if you have that, you know, a voice or a route into any of these kind of key people that make decisions in your organisations, let us know and you know, get us on board in these conversations, because it is so important, and it is around that proactivity. And actually coming back to kind of meaningful conversations that Neil was talking about, and the kind of career type conversations that I've been talking about, which is kind of one and the same. For me, there's something about, you know, I work with a lot of clients to think about transition. So transitioning, like Neil said, you know, you might be transitioning out of a city job into something completely different. So completely different industry, completely different role, whatever it might be. Transition is really key, and supporting that is really key. Now, why haven't we given enough attention, to people transitioning out of the way that we've been working over the last couple of years into the way that we are now? So that whole kind of hybrid model, a flexible model, some companies do it better than others. And also just really supporting people now, you know, like Neil said, it's really critical now. You know, we've been there and we're just getting ourselves back up and standing up straight, etc. But what can we be doing? And what, I suppose, look at some of these, you know, some of the good organisations and what they're doing. There's plenty in the press in terms of, okay, some of the tech companies and what they're doing and whatever it might be. And one size does not fit all. I think that's the one thing that I would say. I'm not saying that organisations have to have one way of doing it for everybody, because I think that's the important point around having these conversations. How can we work this for everyone? You know, that inclusive approach, as opposed to, right, one size fits all and you've just got to get on with it. I mean, would you think that's fair, Neil?
May I ask you a question, Carly?
Go for it.
It feels like a big, overwhelming subject, and it feels like a big sort of philosophical piece of work. How do you get started? What should be the first step on creating a culture of inclusivity, a culture of belonging, where people feel they're a part of something? From your perspective, what do you feel is the first step?
I mean, it comes to that bigger piece, isn't it? I think for me, like I said, I think when things work in harmony and you've got that kind of clear strategy and that kind of understanding where the organisation is going and how they value people, kind of who they want, who they need, etc. I think from an individual perspective, when we talk about that kind of ownership piece, I think that's where you need to try and start getting some clarity around what it is you actually want. And that's what people are doing. So whether your organisation is doing it or not, people are starting to do that slowly and fast. People are doing that. They're having that thinking in their own minds. But in terms of culture change, I think I echo a bit of what you say, Neil. I think you need to start having these conversations. You need to start bringing this to the fore, you know, and it could be a case of things aren't working right, well, how can we address this? And I think just awareness of you know, what Neil's organisation does, what my organisation does at Personal Career Management, and how we can help organisations think some of this through can really be of benefit. And I would urge you to look at both our websites and think about some of the programs that we offer. Obviously, Neil's mentioned that Ambassador program. But I think it's got to start somewhere, right? There's no one answer. And I think all organisations are different. You know, it can depend on the size, it can depend on the industry, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no blanket response to that. But I think starting conversations and seeing this as really important in terms of people's well-being and supporting that career development and career management is really important for any responsible employer.
I'm going to just add that I think from our perspective, there is a recipe. There are certain ingredients that you need to have in place. There's different ways of being able to express that. And it's what we call our 7 E's framework to building that culture of belonging and well-being. First one is engagement. What are you doing to engage your people meaningfully? Two-way dialogue. You're getting their perspective, their input. You're not doing it to them or for them. It's a collective journey. The next one is exemplification. Who is exemplifying, leading by example? You know, that should be anyone that's a people leader, but equally, have we got champions and ambassadors throughout the organization that are being the example, that are not telling people what to do, but showing them?
Absolutely.
Next one is empowerment. There are a lot of people that are feeling disempowered right now because of the way that the world is. Power literally means the ability to do or act. People that are empowered have been given the ability to do or act. There are a lot of people that are disempowered because they have no ability to do or act to change or influence their circumstances. What are you doing to empower your people? The next one is encourage. We talked about the importance of feeling valued and feeling connected and part of something. What are you doing to encourage your people, to making sure that they know they've done a good job, that they feel like they're part of something, that they are sharing in the success? And that doesn't need to be financially, but energetically feeling like they're connected to what it is that we're doing. So it's embed. So it's not a one-time gig. It's not like we do, well-being and engagement in May 2020. We never need to 2022. Sorry, and we never need to worry about it again. It's a constant, ongoing journey. How are we embedding this into the nature of organization through policies, processes, procedures, tying it into kind of performance metrics, etc., to learning and development. And the last one is evaluate. Don't do this because it's a nice to do thing, because Neil and Carly said to do it, or because you read about it in the latest kind of management report. Do it because it makes sense, because you are able to observe the quantitative and qualitative benefit it brings to your organization. You are literally able to see both the commercial and cultural benefit you have gained by taking the time to put your people at the center of what you do. And I think that framework, that there is many different ways you can express that, but that structure rings true with every successful organization we work with, and an organization we've instilled that framework and put that in as foundation pillars of how they take their cultural journey forward. They've all achieved success, so that's been a really positive one. I think what's really important now is we've got an opportunity just to get some feedback. We've got a great group of people that have joined us today. If you've got any questions, comments, feedback, if anyone want to share, even if you disagree with some of the things that we've said, we really want to hear from you. Absolutely. I don't know if it's possible for you guys to be able to unmute yourself and put your camera on so we can see you. That'd be great. Or otherwise, if you're not comfortable.
Perhaps I can suggest maybe, given that we've got quite a few people on, if you can maybe use an emoji, maybe like a hand up or something like that. Then Ellen, if you can just
unmute you,
if you can just unmute and invite someone to speak, that'd be great.
Fantastic. And if you're not comfortable coming on camera, you can put your messages into the chat box as well. But we really want to hear from you. Sort of questions, comments, feedback are most welcome, because we're here to help and serve you to the best of our ability. The better we understand sort of what your experience has been here today, the easier it is for us to be able to ensure we've given you the information you need to take you the next step.
Any questions? Anyone showing up, Helen?
Yeah. Anyone got anything?
We've got Chris Jones got a question.
Hi, Chris.
Hi.
I'll break the silence. We talked a lot about the sort of top-down structural approach. I think one of the big concerns that we see, we deliver call center training around difficult conversations, and there's a lot of difficult conversations right now. Cost of living is the obvious one, but the knock-on effect to that, which I'm sure Neil, the link between financial difficulty and mental health is so strong.
Absolutely.
That we need to build this resilience within organizations that you've talked very eloquently about. But we've got to do that against the backdrop of all this grief and emotion, which is being loaded up on people. And these are the people that are going to give the kind of response from your organization. So I think, yes, it needs to come from the top, but the people that are going to be walking out the door because their job was tough enough before, but now it's really hard to recruit in call centers, particularly if you're an energy company, you're getting a lot of people in really difficult spots at the moment. I just wonder, how can we switch that around? How can we take the people that get paid probably the least and actually empower them in a way that, how does that work? And they don't even have the right skill sets, I don't think, a lot of the time, because we hired them to be highly transactional people, and now we're expecting them to be these deep relational people.
Yeah, so it's a really good point, and I think that in itself is probably the topic of a 1 hour future webinar. What I was going to suggest is that there needs to be a two-pronged approach. Our definition of stress is where demand exceeds an individual's resources or capacity to cope with that demand. So we think of a bridge, say Tower Bridge in London, Golden Gate Bridge, Sydney Harbour Bridge, doesn't matter. But we start loading this bridge up with cars, lorries, trucks, planes, Boeing 747s, the International Space Station, a couple of cruise ships. I don't care how well constructed the bridge is, it's eventually going to get to failing point and the bridge will collapse. before it collapses, we'll know it's not coping particularly well because it'll be bowing, buckling, groaning, creaking, fracturing. At that point, you've got one of two choices to prevent the bridge from collapsing. Either we take some of the load off, or we reinforce the bridge. And doing this as quickly as I can for purposes of of time. But the reality is right now, people have much more on their bridge than ever before. We were dealing with the pandemic, and I read a article, I can't remember what magazine it was, and it was joking, but it's kind of half true that COVID ended and the next day World War III started. And it was just like, when is this going to end? It feels like we're in the middle of a really bad movie. On top of that, we've got the cost of living crisis, we've got the energy crisis, we've got a huge amount of uncertainty about the future, we've got interest rates going up, we've got inflation, we've got, from a political perspective, there's a lot of trust and faith have been lost in our leaders because of some of the stuff that's come out recently. So we're in this kind of perfect storms type situation. People have a ton of stuff on their bridge, even before we look at work context stuff, if that makes sense. The pressure this is putting on people's relationships, and people's bridges are totally overloaded. If you are literally just focused on what you can take off, you may not be able to take enough off to give people that sense of relief. So we do need to consider, what are we doing to support people's bridges, both individually and collectively? We need to take that two-pronged approach, because we've already spent a lot of time talking about the fact that many people's bridges are failing. We are getting more people that are having burnouts, breakdowns, having mental health issues that sadly take their own life. We can see the cost of the bridge collapse. So part of this dialogue must be organizations need to consider, well, what can I do to better structure the load people are being subjected to prioritize, to delegate, to spread that workload, to give, as you said, Chris, so rightly, train people, give them the tools, resources, training, equipment, and confidence to be able to deal with the challenges they're facing, and ensure that we are taking the time to support people. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that, Carly.
I just echo that. I think I'm conscious of time, but I think echo all of that. And I think it's, you mentioned right at the start there, Chris, with your question around that difficult conversations. And that's something we're working with clients with as well, in the same way that I know Neil and his company are. It's not being afraid of those difficult conversations, it's having them. You're not expected to have all the answers, particularly as managers and leaders. You're not expected to have all the answers. People don't expect that. They just want to be heard, right? And as Neil said, just trying to take some of that load off where possible. And it may be a short-term fix, it may be something longer term, whatever. But also, I suppose in that kind of development side, yes, it's heads down, get the job done, do it with the resources that you have, et cetera, et cetera. So I know there's a kind of a realistic situation there for you. But I think it's any of those broadening opportunities or anything, that can keep people engaged. It may not be the work content, it might be other things they can get involved in, or, it's just what's driving those individuals, and what more can you do that's not pay related or not, whatever it is. It's more around their development and their engagement, I think. So it's really going right into those conversations and having them with these people. But again, it's kind of that upskilling managers and everyone else to be able to have those difficult conversations, because I appreciate they're not always easy. And that's kind of where myself, our company, and Neil's kind of can support some of that.
Does that kind of partly answer your question, Chris? I know it's not a full answer, we could spend a lot more time talking about it, but does that help?
Yeah, it does, because that's the area of my biggest concern, is the fact that we rely on customer service staff, and we're not going to have any. We've gone down digital routes, and then we've gone down with kind of overloading people with stuff that they're just not trained to deal with, and they'll go and deliver parcels for Amazon because they don't have to. Emotionally, it's an easier job.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I'd urge you, get in contact with myself and or Neil, following this event. We'll be happy to chat a bit more about some of that afterwards. Very conscious of time because we've hit 1 o'clock, Neil, but I know there's one question here that I'll just quickly address, and then we'll just wrap up. So I think I can see it, Ellen, and correct me if I'm wrong if there's any others, but if you had to choose a number one way leaders can support employees to reduce stress immediately, what would it be? I'm going to pass that to Neil.
The most important thing is to have a two-way dialogue. Now, again, people are looking for like that quick fix solution, do this and everything will change. Well, we're all looking for the silver bullet, the magic pill that cures stress and makes people feel better. The most important thing we need to do is to understand why people feel the way that they feel, is what is the root cause, rather than dealing with the symptoms.
Yeah.
And until we start tackling the root causes, all you're doing is you're putting sticking plasters over things. And for far too long, that's what I've seen happening. This is the moment where we actually really need to double down on well-being, on putting our people at the very center of what we do. talk to them, be willing to listen, even if you don't like the answer. You know, people in the past used to be scared of having conversation around stress and mental health because they thought they'd open the Pandora's box and everyone will come down with a stress disease. Well, you know, all you're doing is you're burying, suppressing, and overriding. It's not going away. Yeah. What will happen is they will go away because they'll think, I'm not doing this anymore. So open up safe spaces to have those dialogues in a non-judgmental way. And I think that is the perfect way to start this journey. And again, Michael, I could probably spend an hour talking about that on
its own, yeah. But I agree, with careers, it's exactly the same. People have avoided these types of conversations till now. This is the time, you know, if there's no better time to be doing this, because these are the real concerns like Chris had, like Michael, you've had as well. So hopefully we've been able to give you some ideas, useful guidance, tips, etc. But please do feel free to contact myself and or Neil after this event. You know, I would urge you to look at our website, full of information. So, you know, ours is personalcareermanagement.com. Neil's, I think yours is
stress.org.uk, and there's a bunch of free resources on there for everybody as well. Liz did ask a question around recordings. We are recording this, we will share it, we will post it on our YouTube, and I'm sure that you'll find it on both our social media channels on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, as well as Personal Career Management. So I'll post it on mine also. So if you've enjoyed today, please share the recording with colleagues that might benefit from it, friends, or anyone else that you feel might value it. If you haven't been able to attend for the whole session, obviously use the recording as a way of being able to catch up. And also, yeah, feedback to us. Let us know what you thought. If you've got any questions, if you want to have a chat, reach out. I'm more than happy to have a chat with any of you if you'd like to have a deeper conversation on any element of what we've discussed and explored today. And if you would love to join us on the Mental Health Ambassadors program that's coming up, it's a 4-part program. We are almost full, but it'd be lovely to see some of you there if you feel that would be beneficial. It's been a real pleasure, and it's always fun to hang out with you, Carly.
Absolutely, Neil. I think it was a lovely conversation, and as you know, we do get very enthused by this. So hopefully you've all enjoyed it. It looks like you have from the comments. So I appreciate all your time. Sorry that we've run over just slightly, but no, you can get on with the rest of your day. But lovely to see you all here, and it was great to have such a great turnout. Thanks, everybody.